Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to our facilitator of the evening, Bolanle.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Bolanle Olukani, and I will be moderating this final masterclass. It has been an amazing weekend. I think we can all say that. Thank you so much to GTBank for putting together this wonderful weekend of fashion. I'm so excited about this last masterclass because I can see that there's so many fashion enthusiasts here, and I'm seeing all sorts of wonderful fashion. So we're going to appreciate a lot of the conversation that we're going to be having today. Now, the person I'm about to call is very, very established in her field. She's an expert. She's very young, but she's achieved a lot. She's styled and worked with people like Taylor Swift, One Direction, and Willow Smith, and many others. But most importantly, she's the fashion editor for British Vogue and also the senior fashion editor at large for ID magazine. Ladies and gentlemen, I think that deserves a round of applause. I like it. I like it. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Julia Sarr Jamois. A round of applause, please, for her as she comes to the stage. I'm really, really excited. Thank you guys for the wonderful music. It was like they didn't want it to end, right? I'm really excited, Julia. It's so good to have you in Lagos. Doesn't she look wonderful?
To be here.
You know, it's interesting because earlier I had asked her for fashion tips about my outfit, and she told me that I should wear sneakers, and I said, of course, haute dressing. But I decided to do my Lagos heels. And I'm so excited that you're here. I'm so excited that we're going to be talking about authenticity through fashion and fashion trends. Now, you're really young, but you're so accomplished. So tell us briefly about your journey and how you got to where you are.
Yeah. So I started out doing a foundation at Camberwell College of Art, and I was studying there. And then I got offered a 2-week internship at ID. So I went there and I absolutely loved it. So I decided to quit my course. So I quit university very early on and go full-time into working at ID. So I was 19 when I started working at ID, and I interned there. So I worked there for a year, which was an amazing experience. Like, I learned so much. I met so many people that I still work with now. It was absolutely incredible. So that's kind of like where I started my journey. Then I became one of the youngest fashion editors. I was 21, very young, and I got given a job at Wonderland magazine. So I worked there for a few years, then ended up back at ID, which was my ultimate dream. I always wanted to work there. And obviously now I'm at Vogue, which is incredible, under Edward. So yeah, that's kind of how it all started.
Now, why did you choose fashion? What made you fall in love with fashion?
I chose fashion. I always loved fashion from a very young age, and I started going to university because I thought I wanted to be a fashion designer. Then I soon learned how difficult that was, and I always loved clothes. And one of my mum's friends when I was younger, she worked for a magazine, and I was like, that looks like an amazing job. So I kind of always wanted to work for a magazine as well as being a stylist, because I think those things are quite different. You know, when you're a stylist, you work with brands and you style shoots outside, but when you're at a magazine, you're very much involved with the concept from the beginning. So I think it's quite a different experience, and you learn a lot more. You're really more like a creative director because you're putting together the whole idea. So you're suggesting people, like the whole team, who's going to do the hair and makeup, who's going to be the model. So it's a whole big, complete picture basically that you're thinking about. So I think that aspect is super interesting, and it's something that I loved doing.
I just want to make sure we can all hear Julia really well. Yes? No? Can I get a yes or no? We can hear her well. No. So can we have her mic turned up just a little bit, please? I want to make sure they can hear you very well in the back. Now, Julia, you know, earlier we were talking about big fashion editors, and it sounds really glamorous. You know, we're all like, oh, I want to be a fashion editor. But can you break down what a day in your life is like, being a fashion editor?
Yeah, like how you put together a story. Okay, so you start researching the shows. So all the fashion shows, you'll like look through all of the shows that have just been from the new season, and then you kind of like pull together ideas from that. And once you've done that, you kind of think about like who would be a good photographer to shoot those pictures. And then sometimes you'll work with the photographer to choose the model, or sometimes I already have an idea in mind of like who I want it to be, that kind of thing. So it is a very collaborative process, but I think the initial idea comes from the fashion editor and the stylist. So that's what's so exciting as well, is that you can really drive what the vision's going to be.
Now, I want to talk, we're going to get to, working with Edward, of course,
Yeah.
and Vogue, and that whole process of being part of Vogue. But I want us to talk a little bit about ID, and I know you're really passionate about working there because it's a magazine that deals with a lot of social issues. So tell us a little bit about the difference between working with Vogue versus ID.
Yeah. Well, I think the difference is like ID is like a youth magazine, so it's and it's very into, so like you said, like social issues. So there's that difference there, and it's more about like street culture, street style. It's much more youthful, whereas Vogue is much more about luxury and opulence and that kind of thing. So they're very different points of view. But I think as a stylist, it's important to be very versatile and to be able to show both of those sides of things. So, I think for me, I'm in an amazing position because I get to do both. Yeah.
And it's fascinating because you're right, they're kind of on two different spectrums.
Yeah.
And here you are doing both, and you're a contributor to both. How do you think you're able to do that in terms of, because sometimes I think when we're thinking of branding, a lot of us who possibly are fashion enthusiasts or have a passion or a desire to want to become an editor, we feel like we have to carve a niche in one direction, no pun intended. But how do you feel like you're able to meet both markets and bring your creativity to both fields?
I think it's because I'm interested in both of those things. Like I'm interested in that luxury, high-end aesthetic, but I'm also interested in like the street style, this much more streetwear aspect as well. So I think there's and that's in my personal style as well. Like I'll mix like, a piece from Celine with like some Palace or something. Like that's very much how I dress personally. So I think that's something that's interesting to me throughout my work and, as from a personal point of view as well.
Now let's talk about Vogue. I know you recently started that position in May. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Very exciting. And you're working with Edward. If we're going to clap, let's do a full-time clap. A full-time clap. She has some really good supporters in the right. Shout out to you. So how did you begin working with Vogue? I know Edward started ID, so tell us a little bit about what made you decide to work with Vogue.
Well, I started Edward started working at ID as well. That's where his career started. So I guess that's the kind of thing that almost brought us together as well, as we both started at the same place. But I just met with him and we got on really, really well, and he's an inspiring person to work for, and I think what he's doing at British Vogue is amazing. He's really pushing boundaries in so many different ways, and I'm just really happy to be part of it, and I hope that I can as well, contribute to that, like push boundaries and really make people think about fashion in different ways, because I think that's the future. People need to start thinking of like how you can help with fashion as well, rather than just take. You have to give back as well.
Now I want us to talk a little bit about African fashion.
Yeah.
As you can see, we're all... Give that a minute. Okay. I want us to talk a little bit about African fashion. As you can see, we're all very fashionable, right?
Yeah.
Africans are
Extremely
fashionable.
Yeah.
I don't think I ever walk into a room thinking I will be the
No.
most slayest person there. What do you think about African fashion, and what does the international world fashion industry really think about African fashion?
I think for me the thing in Africa is like everyone is like very stylish. So it's like it's not even just about fashion, it's about style, and I think those are two different things. Like, some people can wear the same thing, but it's just the attitude. And I think in Africa, the attitude is there. Like, you can just put on anything and they'll own it. Like, the clothes are not wearing them, they're wearing the clothes.
And are there any designers that you have really connected with? I know you're wearing a Nigerian designer, Kenneth Eze. And, you're wearing waffles and cream.
Waffles and cream, yeah.
Yeah, waffles and cream. And your
He's
slippers
there.
are Kenneth Eze. Yeah. So,
He's amazing. Shout out.
It's really exciting to see you in Nigerian pieces.
Yeah.
Do you feel like sometimes, though, there's usually one narrative? Because I will say this, I do feel like the international fashion industry has an expectation on how they believe African fashion should look. And I'm using African very loosely. When I mean African, I mean specifically Nigerian, should look. And there's almost a pressure to stick onto the print side. Do you think there's going to be opportunity for all different types of expression of African fashion?
Yeah, definitely. Because, like, you know, when I was walking outside, like, for me, like, African fashion is about tailoring. Like, my grandmother, Senegalese, like, you know, she used to go, when I was little, when I was in Dakar with her, she'd take me to the tailor, and it's like, you know, no, I want it to be like this, you got to fix this, you know, like telling them exactly what to do, like classic, like African grandmother. But, like, you know, I think it's not just about print, it's about the cuts as well, like some of the most incredible tailors here. So I think for me, that's an interesting thing that will probably be the next thing, is something that is quite, you know, focused on tailoring. Like, that to me would be so interesting to see.
Awesome. Now, style, personal style.
Yeah.
I think that for someone who works with so many people who do have their own style, and you understand the art of style,
Yeah.
how does one actually create personal style?
I think it's hard to say, like, create personal style, but I think it's more about just how you put things together. It needs to feel, like, honest to you, like what you want to wear. And as long as you feel good, that's the main thing. It's like, you've got to feel good in what you're wearing.
And trends. I
Yeah.
know that it's funny because we were having a conversation earlier, and we were talking about, you know, how trend starts and celebrity and how that's heavily driven. Do you believe that trends sometimes can be focused too much on specific piece and maybe it doesn't work for everyone? And is there a way to jump on a trend but still personalize it to your own style?
Yeah, I think if you see a trend and you like it, I think it's more about mixing it in with, like, things that you already own, or kind of just trying elements of it. Maybe it's an accessory rather than the full outfit. So I think it's not just like, okay, I'm going to just go for this full trend, because maybe you end up not looking, doesn't suit you. It's all about making sure things suit you and that it, you know, you feel comfortable.
Yeah. Now, I know there are a lot of designers. Do we have designers here in the room? Raise your hand if you're a designer. Raise your hand high. She might put you in Vogue. All right, so want to find out, what is the process? If a designer is aspiring, you know, they're up and coming, what is the process of getting noticed by a magazine like British Vogue or ID to be able to have their pieces shown in there?
I think the best advice is to, like, really hone your craft and make sure that, like, what you're doing is, like, you know, is like the best it can be. And I think if you're producing something amazing, then people are going to come to you anyway. So I think just focus on, like, doing better and, like, making it really, really good, and then it's just going to come.
That's brilliant. Now, guys, we want to remind you to stay till the end because we do have some gifts and goodie bags. We're going to open up the floor to question and answer because I know we have a lot of questions, so I want to start as early as possible. So if you do have a question, can you indicate by raising your hand, please? All right, so can we get a microphone and begin our question and answer? So we'll start with, there's a gentleman over, oh, let's start with the lady with the orange fascinator right here.
Good evening. My name is Tolope Ojulewa. I'm a makeup artist and I'm actually starting my own clothing line. So what I want to ask the question, how can a fashion designer use the social media to leverage on social media to put him or herself out there, his brand out there into the international world? I'm sure there's a lot of people here with talent, with so much inside of them, masterpieces that are yet to be made, but it's just there. How do you put it out there that we get the return in terms of monetary return, and as well as the joy, the fulfillment that comes with, my masterpieces out there in the international world, people can appreciate it. So it doesn't just die with us. How do we reach out using the social media platform? Thank you.
So pretty much,
I didn't really hear that, sorry.
No, it's okay. So how do you use social media? She's an up-and-coming designer, and she wants to know, how do you use social media to leverage on making sure that your brand gets, you know, it generates income and also gets the awareness that it needs to, not just in Nigeria, but on an international level?
I think it's good to make sure that your profile looks consistent. So maybe it's like, you know, get a style to your Instagram. Don't just put, like, random things. Have an idea. Maybe it's like you know you have a formula. I think that's really important. But I think it's important to make sure that you do, like, focus on Nigeria for now and making that, like, your home and making that with your work, rather than just worrying so much about international. It's like, worry about what's going on here. Like, you've got amazing stuff going on here. Focus on that.
All right, thank you. Another question. Can we have the gentleman over here on the left, please?
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Julia. My name is Dara. I want to ask a very simple question. And I would like to know, what is your creative process like? What gives you inspiration for every piece of work you do? For instance, when you were styling Taylor Swift, for instance, what inspired you? How did you draw inspiration? And then for all of the work you do, what's your creative process like, basically?
Can you repeat that again? Sorry, I
Yeah,
couldn't
so
really hear.
creative process, where do you get most of your inspiration when you are working on a shoot or an editorial?
Yeah. So research is super important. So I do a lot of research. I start from that really, researching new brands and also using references. But it's also a conversation. A lot of it is a conversation. So if I'm working with someone, it will be a conversation with the photographer or the hair and makeup. So it's very collaborative. It's not just me, which is a great thing about what I do, is that it involves other people as well.
Thank you. All right, another question. Right over here on the right. Yeah, right over there.
Thank you. My name is Raphael. I'd like to know the place of fashion illustrators in your line of work. Because when it comes to creative and getting your own personal style developed, your own fashion line, the importance and the relevance of fashion illustrator is not so much obvious in Africa, so to say. For example, in my organization, we are looking out for fashion illustrators all over Africa for a project, and it was so taxing finding one or two in different countries in Africa. So in a way of bringing the career opportunity out of the fashion world, how or where is the place of a fashion illustrator in your work? Thank you.
So where is the place for fashion illustrators in the fashion industry? Is there a place for them?
For fashion illustrators, well, I think you could maybe you could do a book or something like that. I think that would be a good place for a fashion illustrator, and it doesn't have to be you can produce it yourself. I think it's really the most important thing as well is ID started out as a kind of tiny little scrapbook almost. It was like a zine, and I think if you want to do something, you just do it, just make it. Anyone can do anything these days. So
yeah, thank you very much. That's a great answer. All right, right next to and right over there, just in the middle. Yeah, your hand. You have the two peace sign. Hand up.
Okay, hi, good evening. I'm Otolani. Yeah, there's this challenge about fashion, being focused about fashion and the likes. You're trying to, when you are this fashionista, you're trying to create a design for yourself and you're like, okay, let me do this. Okay, can I do this? And you're like, how do you create your focus in the line of fashion? How do you create your focus in the line of fashion? Okay.
So how do you create your focus when you're thinking about your fashion brand and sticking to it?
Focusing is hard, especially with Instagram. There's so many distractions. I think you just have to be very clear, have a very clear vision, really know what you want to do and really think about it. Sit with yourself and think about, is this right? And sometimes you're going to change your mind and you're going to make mistakes, but that's fine. Just keep going.
Thank you. All right, let's get right over here in the front.
Good evening. Yeah, sir, I wanted to ask, as in the line of fashion styling, if you have a client that she gives you a particular style, that this is what you should work with, but that's not your strongest point, and you're trying to make her see you're trying to give her an advice on what is going to help her out. How do you balance that? So it's not like you're conflicting or as in finding yourself in a misunderstanding within your client?
That's a really good question. I think you just have to be very diplomatic and positive. Like, always be positive in your answer and your conversation. Don't say anything negative. Like, be very polite, and you can say things in a nice way that's like send criticism, basically.
Thank you. And we'll just move the microphone right here down to the front. The gentleman with the blue hat.
Hello, Julia. My name is Tepi. My question is in line of creativity. Do you use illustrators to create designs? Are you an illustrator? Do you do illustration? Most times I see illustrators, all they do is do designs for females. What about women? Do you have ideas that could help? Do you have a book where you draw your stuff and then translate it into designs? Yeah.
So you're asking, does she do illustrations
Yes.
and designs for men?
Not just for men, but generally, yeah.
He's asking, I guess, if you're an illustrator.
Yeah.
I
Does she
can't-
use illustration?
No, I really can't draw. But when I'm putting together ideas, it's more in my mind. So it's more like ideas when with the clothes and stuff, it's more like in my head. I don't really draw or write things down. It's very instinctive.
Okay. And while we're getting ready for the next question, is it possible to also have one of the editorials that Julia has done so she can talk us through it as well? Can we get right over there in the back?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Sonia Kachuku. I want to ask you, you dropped out of university. What gave you that confidence that you're going to make it in the fashion industry?
That's a really good question. I just followed my gut, I guess, and I asked my mum, and she was like, "Yeah, just if you want to do it, you should do it." I just followed my gut, and I knew that's what I wanted to do, and the opportunities came, so I thought I'll keep going with it.
And just a side note, Julia's parents are African, so it shows you that it's possible. Your dad is Senegalese, French,
Yeah, my
Moroccan,
dad's Senegalese,
right?
yeah.
So it's cool to see
Yeah.
African parents supporting our dreams.
Yeah.
All right, can we get right here you can just right over there, at the back, right over there. Yeah, right there. Julia, I want us to talk through one of the editorials. So once the editorial comes up, if you could just pause it and not have it move so we can focus on just one.
Good evening, Julia. I'm Nana. How are you? I know there's a lot of talk about African identity and you working at ID, British Vogue. How have you been able to continue that narrative of the African identity as it relates to fashion and making sure that Africans, across the continent have a platform to showcase their designs, tell their stories?
Sorry, can you say it again and can you speak louder, please?
Can you hear me better?
Yeah, that's better.
Yeah, my question's in relation to fashion and identity here in Africa. Now at ID and British Vogue, how have you been able to champion those stories for everybody to hear in a global perspective?
Well, I mean, I'm very lucky because I've worked with people who have championed me, I guess. So I think that's part of it as well, is having the support from people who are your seniors and them believing in you. So I think that's how I've been able to do that.
Wonderful. Can we get one of Julia's editorial pieces? I know that you wanted to talk us through one of them. So we have Willow Smith's campaign right here. So if you can just tell us a little bit about this editorial and the process of coming together with this final product.
So this was an editorial for ID, and we shot Willow Smith in LA. Tyrone LeBon was the photographer. And we just kind of wanted it to be out of this world, otherworldly feeling. So, but then still quite chic with the tailoring. So that's why you've got her in the suit. She's actually wearing Gucci suits from the very first collections. And then the picture on the right-hand side there that you can see, Willow and the photographer were basically hanging off the edge of a cliff. And I was like, oh my God, Willow Smith's going to fall off Willow Smith's going to fall off the cliff. But so it was an incredible picture in the end.
Now, in terms of, the clothes that she's wearing, when you're coming up with which designers to work with, do you already have specific people in mind, or is it more of when you find a piece that matches it? Like, how name heavy are you when you're coming up with which designers you want to work with?
Well, it's a lot of prep goes into a shoot, so it's hours and hours of work. It's so much work. It doesn't just the clothes don't just appear. You have to put all the requests into the designers 2 weeks in advance, and then they might not be available for your dates, or they're on another shoot. So you really have to be very organized as well to be a stylist. Yes, it's creative, but it's 90% organization. If you're not organized, it's not going to work. If you forget all the shoot's not going to look good. So you have to be very professional, very focused, very organized, and then the fun bit is on the day when you have everything there.
And in terms of hair, and also, because I've been on a few shoots where, I have a stylist who has specific looks that they want, and sometimes you wear something and, the person might not feel comfortable. How do you balance that specifically as a fashion editor and as a stylist to say, I think this looks really good on you? How do you convince your clients to wear the pieces?
Have to be really encouraging and positive, but they look great and kind of stuff. So, it's especially with a celebrity, sometimes that they just don't want to wear something. So you just have to be okay, next. You just have to be very fluid. Move quickly and think quickly on your feet, because sometimes you have to change things very last minute as well.
That's wonderful. We're going to take one final question right here. She's over here. Okay, so Julia is chosen. On the right, over here, please. The microphone is so far. Do you know what? You should probably jog up here, or just yeah. Go ahead, jog up here, because she's taking too long for us. Go ahead.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, Julia. My name's Bai. Huge fan. Just wanted to know, so what do you say to African parents from the old generation who don't believe in the arts as a sustainable career path?
Thank you.
I think the arts is one of the most rewarding paths, because my mum was a textile designer, and I was always well, this is not really creativity. It's not really, you're not saving lives, but she was always if you're giving something back to humanity, we all need to love creativity, because it's part of being human. It's part of being alive.
That's wonderful. Ladies and gentlemen, can we give Julia a Lagos fashion welcome and say thank you to her for coming to Nigeria? Absolutely amazing. Such a fashion icon. I hope that you've enjoyed this masterclass, and we thank you for joining us. And yeah, that's it for the GTBank Fashion Week 2018 masterclass. Hopefully you all learned something. My name is Bolanle Olukani. We'll hopefully see you next year. Thank you very much.